The story begins with an otaku boy. He is electrocuted due to his own carelessness. Several hundred volts passed completely through his body. His eyes slowly rolled upward in tears. He realized that he was probably going to die now. Mountains covered in snow and eternal cold. Some boy in a wagon who fought thieves along the way. "What do you want to sell me?" the city asked the boy in surprise. "That's right, my friend," answered Baron Carter, and his son Feska stood beside him. The boy realized he couldn't buy the whole city. "The old man says he wants to sell everything so he can retire. And he's selling the town for 5 crystal glasses." The guy immediately imagines owning the whole town and having his own castle at his disposal. His eyes sparkled brightly, and he dreamed of it. He began to imagine how in the castle he was surrounded by different but all very beautiful girls. But the guy also thought the Baron's son might be up to something, in case he killed him as soon as he got the castle. But he believed in himself, remembering all the games he'd played. Well, there were also vultures in this world that ate corpses after battles. Coming to another city, the guy thought that only the strongest survive and the weakest are devoured. Some were confessing their love, some were sick with alcohol. Everyone in this town was minding their own business without interfering with others. A guy named Lu Feng is a merchant who sells rare items. He's always wandering around and has never found a place to stay for a long time. He walks into a building with a sign for beer. He went up to the owner and asked her for a cup of water. Followed by a little smile, he asked if she wanted to sell him her tavern. And yet he insisted on it. On the owner saying that this little store is completely empty, so she thought he was crazy. The guy wanted to turn it into a hotel. And he's still asking her to sell him the place, but the landlady refuses. Feng said he could pay a lot of money for the place. Some old man in the back said that if he had a lot of money he could buy the city. Feng was surprised at what the old man said. It was Baron Carter and his son Feska, and both dressed like nobles. This was Feng's regular customer, and Feng didn't understand why he wanted to sell the town. After thinking about it for a while, and then taking his time to exhale, Baron Carter said he was getting old. And the younger generation in the form of his son could not live up to his expectations. He wants to sell his property to move away and retire. Feng initially thought he was being bullied. But he asked exactly how much he wanted for this town he'd owned for years. The old man's eyes became serious. His smile was very evil. Smiling sweetly, he said he only needed 100 gold coins. "What are you doing? Old man is crazy," started yelling the guy in a rage in spite of old man Carter. 100 gold coins is about the equivalent of 4 million sheep. Or 500,000 cows. And it's also the equivalent of sitting around waiting to die for 3 generations. Baron Carter said he would also give him a noble title. But Feng refused the offer despite all this. He noticed something approaching. Someone presented a sword right to his throat. His son Feska had a crazy smile. "You should be grateful that your father offered you such a deal, and you have no right to refuse it," said Feska with the ball in his hands. But old man Carter immediately calmed them both down by saying that the amount could be negotiated. He asked how many gold coins the lad could offer him at this point. Feng said he didn't even have 30 gold coins at the moment. With a smile, Carter said he would sell him the city for 30 gold coins. Talking about what they agreed upon. Feng was in complete shock at this turn of events. He realized that Carter might be lying to him. "As soon as I saw you, I wanted to make you a special offer," Carter said proudly. The old man said, "I didn't have that kind of money today." He could make up for it with jewelry. Feng asked what kind. After a little thought, Carter began to speak. That he would like crystal glasses or something, and then Fong realized something. Realized that while they were engrossed in the conversation, all Carter had done was keep his eyes on his glasses. Is that he'd traveled tens of thousands of miles together in the far east of the earth, and from the most popular stores. The Huarongyu store had a special offer of 5 glasses for only 10 yuan. Fong put a chest of glasses on the table. The only time Carter saw crystal glasses was a long time ago. And at that moment, Fong was well aware that those glasses were not crystal. But he didn't want to distract them while they were enjoying themselves. If he'd known that, he would have brought more glasses. He can travel between Earth and this world once a day. Satisfied, Carter began to ask if Fong had any more treasures. Fong realized that they were willing to kill him for this treasure. And so he decided to think of something. He decided that the best option was to collect all his treasures and put them in his vault. By some obscure magic, the things inside glowed. And then they were gone in an instant except for 2 jars. Fong was already ready to open the chest. And Carter was beyond excited to see something new. "This is my other stuff," said Fong, opening his trunk with a smirk on his face. There was an unwanted rag and 2 jars of some kind. Carter's mood abruptly changed to negative. A fine sunny day in the wheat fields of the Empire. And the 3 of them rode their horses toward the town that Fong had recently bought for cheap glasses. "And it grows quite well," said Fong, looking at the wheat. "Of course it does," confirmed old Carter. He also warned to beware of the canocrats who come to rob the grain during the fall harvest. "My friend," said Carter cheerfully. "Here is the city of Shiyang," the old man went on to say. Feng's eyes began to shine brightly like stars at what he saw. Carter coughed a little and said he was looking in the wrong place. "It's over here," the old man said, pointing in the other direction. Feng immediately looked to the left, with his hand pointing with maps to some old village in the vicinity. The signboard with the name of the town was barely hanging. The houses were dilapidated. When Feng saw this picture, he immediately cried. He realized that this was not a city but a horror. Slowly but surely the 3 of them arrived at the main gate of the city. Feng was well aware of the situation he was in. The village was very poor and everyone walked around in ragged clothes with dirty faces and hands. As Feng drove by, he heard the villagers talking about hunger. And some just passed by and pretended not to be noticed. Some shouted that they were vermin. But most of the people with plates asked for food. After a while they passed the village in question. Ahead of them was the bell tower, which was just beginning to chime. Gathered in one place, the people were complaining a lot. Almost everyone thought that the governor would raise their taxes again. "My beloved countrymen," shouted Carter from the bell tower. He announced that he was granting the title of Baron to Baron Fan. And said joyfully that from this day he would be lord of this city. But the people were not happy, for they knew that all barons are parasites who raise taxes. Carter, shining with happiness, said that now he would leave the town in peace. Feng first stood and looked at all the people for a couple of seconds. "Hello, everyone," said Feng with a smile on his face. And no matter how he smiled, everyone shouted that he was just another parasite. They called him a bloodsucker because they had no more money. And then one of them threw a rock at him. The people below decided to riot and beat the new lord. Now Feng understood why Carter had sold the city so cheaply. Feng had to listen to the people's outrage for a few more minutes. And at this point, former Lord Carter is yelling at some people for not defeating someone. One of the people says their opponent is too strong. "You're completely useless," said evil Carter. But then he had a fleeting idea. Point 136. Riding in on his horse, he called out to Feng. Carter said he left him a secret gift in the dungeon. What kind of gift was it? Feng thought. Carter said he had to go right now, and if he was late the castle would be destroyed. Feng was very shocked at this news. The second he did, he quickly ran towards the castle where Carter's gift was. He didn't know what exactly was inside the dungeon. And after a while, Feng reached the castle. Slowly but surely he began to open the front doors of the castle. The dungeons were crawling with small rats. And several torches were lit. Feng kept moving deeper into the dungeon, which was more like a torture chamber. Shining his flashlight, Fei asked if anyone was there. With his left hand, he checked to see if the gate was securely closed. But they immediately began to creak and fall. While the iron gate was falling on Feng, he managed to bounce back the right distance. Scratching his nose, he was pleased with himself. And only as the gate approached, Feng immediately realized that something was wrong. And the gate's great weight fell right onto his toes. He continued to walk further into the depths. But tears were streaming from his eyes as it was very painful. Shining his flashlight, he saw something. In the darkness, he could clearly see the ears. And then he saw the cat's tail. On a pile of hay in a dark, damp dungeon lay the cat girl. Feng was shocked and could not believe his eyes. He went to her and begged her to wake up. Feng took her by the shoulder and asked if she was okay. Water, the cat girl said in a very quiet voice. Feng thought it was probably the gift Carter was talking about. He couldn't just stand by and watch her die. Magic began to appear in Feng's hand. It felt like he was opening a portal in front of him. And indeed he did, he opened a portal to a vault of items. Feng was looking for water to offer the cat girl. He thought it would be better if she drank some energy drinks. And he chose one of the bottles. Little by little he poured the water directly into her mouth. And after a few seconds her eyes opened fully. And then she spit all the water right into Feng's face. Feng started coughing a little. And at the same second Catgirl hit him with her knee right in the head. Feng flew back a little and blood came out of his nose. The impact left a bruise on his forehead. But Catgirl isn't done yet. She started bouncing off the walls in different directions to deliver a surprise blow. And then she got to Feng and was ready to kill him. Feng started screaming hard for help. Before he died, he started to remember all his years on Earth and even the ones he shouldn't show. As he cried, he remembered that he still hadn't taken some woman to be his wife. But then Feng noticed something. Catgirl fainted right there lying on top of him. As he exhaled, he realized he was safe now. The bright yellow sun shone over the new lord's castle. He placed the catgirl, unfamiliar to him, on the bed. To think she's so beautiful, thought the perverted Feng. And this mysterious catgirl was named Mina. Feng didn't understand why Carter had locked her in the dungeon. Poor Mina probably fainted because she was so hungry. In his storehouse, Feng began looking for rice to boil some porridge. The wind picked up a leaf from the table. And then it started to fly away. A few seconds later and the leaflet was already outside the castle. And then it began to fall near passers-by in the village. And fell on some old man's head. "What is this thing?" said the old man in surprise. He took the leaf in his hands and carefully began to read the contents. "Come and look at this," the old man shouted across the street. And in the meantime the porridge was ready. Feng was cooling a spoonful of porridge. And then he presented the spoonful of rice to the catgirl's mouth. Fong tried to feed her a little, and Mina successfully swallowed what was in the spoon. Without opening her eyes, she felt something delicious. Then she realized it was rice cereal. Mina jumped off the bed as if she hadn't slept at all. "It's all you," Mina said in a disgruntled voice as she looked at Fong. Mina started attacking with her claws. She grabbed Fong by the throat and asked what he made her eat. And little by little she pressed him into a chair. Barely able to pronounce the word, Fong said it was rice porridge. And then brought the bowl of porridge right up to Mina. The porridge looked very wonderful and smelled delicious. Mina's eyes shone that very second. And with her tongue she licked her lips. In a moment she remembered to keep her temper in check because people were always evil. The rumbling of her stomach spoke for itself. "Eat that portion of porridge yourself," shouted Mina. And Fong had no problem agreeing to it. He happily sat down the rice porridge. And then thanked himself for it. But Mina was not pleased and told him to eat more. Fong said he could eat until there was nothing left. After another bite, Mina realized the porridge wasn't poisoned after all. "Hey, are you okay?" Fong asked. Mina ate a month's worth of his rice in a few minutes, leaving only empty plates. Fong was shocked at her appetite. But Mina decided to pretend it wasn't her. And told Fong to let her go or she'd kill him. Once again Fong was shocked by her temper. He said no one was stopping her and pointed his finger right at the door. Reluctantly Mina began to walk away towards the door. "Be careful out there," Fong said one last time. "Be sure not to get caught by Carter and the other bandits in the future." Mina realized that he was a little different from the other nobles. Fong smilingly winked his eye at her before leaving. This caused Mina to blush a little. Her cat ears heard something. And at that moment, she realized something was wrong. Mina immediately pounced on Fong, thinking that he had ambushed her. "There's an ambush outside," Mina shouted, holding Fong by the throat. Fong, crying, started to say that he was the only one in the castle. Outside, people could be heard screaming. A large crowd of protesting people started shouting for the castle gates to be opened. Mina now thinks Fong is deceiving her. But Fong says he doesn't know what's going on there either. A crowd of men with guns start shouting that they want to kill them. All the people near the castle were very aggressive. With homemade stakes, they tried to break down the castle door together to get in. And Fong and Mina were just outside that door. "They're not my men." "You need to hide quickly," said Fong. "If I really wanted to hurt you, you'd be dead by now." Mina didn't know what to do. At one point, people broke through and rushed in. "Here," he shouted, one of the men kicking the door in. They immediately ran forward. "Don't let them escape," shouted the swarthy fellow. With a concerted effort, the crowd of people surrounded poor Fong. And then they put all their weapons to his throat. "City Lord!" shouted someone from the crowd. Fong turned his attention to it. Bafu's old man started asking why he was still trying to collect snake taxes. "But I didn't order you to collect taxes," shouted Fong. "Then what is this?" the old man asked, holding a paper in his hand. Fong remembered that he had sold a shipment of straw paper to Carter a month ago. Fong tried to prove that he did not write what was written on that paper. But people were already aggressively against him. They were talking about deaths and starvation because of the tax. Fong still didn't understand what they were so angry at him about. "You won't let us live, so we won't let you," synchronized people shouted. "I'm going to kill you," shouted the dark-haired guy and swung his sickle at Fong. Fong didn't expect this attack. At that moment, someone knocked the sickle out of the guy's hand with a rock. After which the sickle stabbed into something. "You all hold it together," Mina shouted, defending Feng. She said there was a law about killing. If a commoner kills a nobleman, he will be sentenced to death by hanging. And at this point, the people thought a little bit about their family. Feng was bleeding from his mouth for some reason. "Are you okay?" asked Mina to Feng. Feng, who had a sickle sticking out of his head, answered. Mina immediately started laughing with him. "So what did old man Fu end up shouting?" "You will raise our taxes by 50%. "How is this different from direct preaching on death?" asked the old man, holding a piece of paper in his hand. Feng took the paper from the old man to read. In the letter was written an order to raise taxes, with Carter's signature. Feng realized that Carter was using it as a distraction. Feng began to prove that this order had been issued by the previous city lord. And bit by bits men began to wonder about it. The swarthy guy started shouting that there was no difference between the previous lord and the one now. "I am Lu Feng," calmly said the new lord. "In the name of the city lord I declare," said Feng, tearing up a piece of paper. He said their taxes would never be raised again and threw the pieces of paper into the air.
The swarthy catgirl guy and old man Fu were surprised. And people thought it was another joke. But before their eyes they saw him tear up a piece of paper. So they were confused and didn't know what they should do. Feng raised his hand and began to speak. And that he would guide them all to acquire wealth and strive for an age of peace. But for this they all need roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty in the mud. Everyone standing there listened intently to what he was saying. And the old man said he thanked him for his great kindness. Feng and said that it was true and they would give up their word. Little by little the people began to leave the Lord disgust. At this time Carter and his son were having lunch in some restaurant discussing Feng. Carter was pleased that the people in the town had gone against Feng. "It looks like we're going to get our town back," said Feska, clapping his hands. "My lord, I have bad news," said who's there inside the restaurant. A townsman came to Carter and Fask with news. Fask asked what had happened since he was so excited. And the old man said that Feng had convinced the people to disperse and also freed the beast. Fask said he would go right away and slaughter the insolent Feng. "Calm down," said old man Carter. Fask was not happy because he had spent a lot of money to buy this beast woman. Kartek said there was no need to hurry now because Feng was now city lord. It won't be long before Baron Omar puts him in his place. After these words, Fask calmed down. He realized that his father was very wise. After a hard day's work, Feng went to bed to get some rest. As he fell asleep, he thought he needed to lie down a little longer. He started humming a song. And at that moment, Mina came up to him. She said that now she was going to leave this castle for sure. And at that moment Feng opened his eyes as if I hadn't slept. "Stop. Your wounds haven't healed yet," Feng shouted after me. "If you go out like this, someone might catch you again like last time." "I'll just kill them," said Mina confidently. Seeing her attitude, Feng just exhaled. He said she could stay in the castle until she healed her wounds. Mina said that people are always up to something not bad, so she doesn't believe it. Smiling, Feng said that it was boring in the castle alone, so he would welcome the company. Mina blushed at this point. Mina and Feng's sweet dialogue could be heard from the Lord's castle. With the statue's head, warm water flows directly into the pool. Mina took off her clothes completely. Her delicate catgirl body was lightly enveloped by the steam of the bath. Without hurrying down the steps, she began to enter the water. There were small waves on the water. As soon as she sat down, she immediately relaxed. It had been a long time since she'd had a good bath. But her wounds still ached. Especially if you touched them. Mina began to remember those days in detention. A bald slave trader came to feed her. Mina was very happy when he gave her bread. After eating, she fell asleep immediately. She was probably just slipped a sleeping pill. That was the day Carter bought her as a slave for fun. She still remembered his face. His sly face was displayed to her even on the water. Mina was angry again, since all humans are liars. Mina's body was visible in the eye. Fong didn't peek at the eye to know the differences between humans and beastmen. Sitting outside the door, he secretly enjoyed what was happening. He couldn't get enough of Mina in the bathhouse. The way her delicate catgirl face looked. Her purple long hair and also her beautiful pink eyes. What he saw made Fang's nose bleed because of the pressure. And at that moment, the cat's ears heard something. "Who's back there?" shouted Mina. "I brought you something to wash yourself with," said Fong from the other side of the door. He only opened the door a little. And then he threw Mina the soap. Mina caught the soap effortlessly with her hands. Holding it in her hands, she didn't realize what it was. "Smells very nice," said Mina, smelled the soap. The soap also gave off Fang's scent. Lying on the luxurious sofa, Fong thought about Mina, namely whether she needed a cat litter box and whether she was afraid of water like all cats. After washing herself, Mina opened the door slightly. Fong quickly got up and reached for the papers. He was reading some paper pretending to work. Mina had cute cat slippers. Fong couldn't help but glance in Mina's direction. "These things," Mina said uncertainly. Mina came out in slippers and only a shirt, and the fact that she was embarrassed only made it more sexy. Fang's nose bled again from the pressure and joy. He looked at the cat girl and couldn't take his eyes off her. And then Mina realized what was wrong. Covering herself, she told him not to look at her so intently. Fong turned away and said he wasn't looking closely. Pointing to the table, Fong said he had made some rice porridge. Mina immediately drooled. Mina said that she really liked rice porridge, but if Fong tried to make some, "I'll kill you," she said, and quickly took the rice porridge. With rice porridge in her hand, Mina said they people are always up to something bad. "But I am different," said Fong and blushed. Taking a seat on a chair, Mina said she was glad. "But also you are a person who peeks at someone washing," smiling, she said. And at that moment Fong realized that he had been exposed. Mina started eating her favorite rice porridge. For the sake of the porridge, she decided to tell him something. She's sure that in a few days he won't want to be a lord and will just run away from here. "Horse thieves," Mina said, banging her plate on the table. "There are 20 days left until the fall harvest. And then they will come to steal the crops. And in the end they may kill the lord of the lands. And then they will take his castle and become the new masters of this city. And at this point Fong has no knights. Now it is clear why Baron Carter takes the city so easily." Smiling, Mina said she could stay and watch them kill each other for money. Fong suggested that she was afraid of horse thieves. But Mina replied that she was afraid of no one but the goddess of snow and ice. "Goddess of snow and ice?" asked Fong. Correctly confirming the answer, Mina replied. 5 years ago, the goddess suddenly became angry and a wind blew gusting to the bone. Their land was turning into a world of ice and snow. They had no choice but to move south. But still the strange people were also shrouded in snow and ice. But Fong didn't know that. Fong joked that at that time he lived far away in the east. Mina says he'd better get out of here soon. Leaving and smiling, she said his main task was not to die. We still have plenty of time, said Feng, smiling. Feng also said that Mina shouldn't worry about him for nothing. Mina turned around and looked at Feng. He confidently said that he had his own way. In an unfamiliar forest, a ferocious tiger chases a laughing boy. The boy's name is Neo Wu and he has a plan. As he runs away, he calls the ferocious tiger a silly cat. While Neo was running in front, a stone barrier appeared in his path. Pushing off the ground with his feet, Neo, smiling, deftly jumped onto this stone barrier. Sitting on a pile of rocks, Neo teases the tiger, who runs after him. The tiger jumps at Neo to tear him with its claws, but Neo dodges. Neo is shouted from the mountain by some man. He was holding a silver spear that he was supporting himself with only one leg. He shouted that it was time for their show to begin. Immediately 4 boys jumped on poor tiger from all sides, holding a net and weapons in their hands. The curly-haired one's name was Neo.The. The boy with the long bangs was called Neo. The fat one in armor was called Neo-san. And the last yellow-eyed one was called Neo-C. The tiger was shocked by their joint attack. They immediately threw a net over it to immobilize it, and then began hitting it with spears from all directions. It was a beautiful sunny day, and the town where Feng was lord could be seen in the distance. The gift is ready. And so we must get on our way, said the man with the spear, and in the background Neo.The and Neo were carrying a large tiger. The Neo family arrived safely in Shiyang town, and the villagers were very surprised at their arrival. The swarthy guy couldn't understand what made them come to the village. They had probably come to see Lu Feng. But the guy with the scarred face didn't believe it, as it was impossible. After all, everyone knows that the Neo family would never just come to some lord's house with a gift. Mother May remembered the time they rescued Feng and started laughing a little. And beautiful Nicole was in love with him and couldn't wait to meet him. I was looking forward to meeting you, shouted Feng inside the castle. They decided to congratulate Feng in honor of becoming a lord. Feng was delighted with the gift of a tiger. The tiger they brought him was at least 300 kilograms. Feng wondered what other presents they had brought with them, and May coaxed Nicole to come over and talk to Feng. But Nicole was shy and embarrassed. May gave Nicole a little nudge forward with her hand. After Nicole went forward, she tripped over the tiger and slowly began to fall towards Feng. Feng thrust his arm forward. Feng caught Nicole and she rested her breasts against him. Her breasts were soft and nice. I haven't seen you in a long time, I'm sure they've gotten bigger, said Feng, and his nose was bleeding. Then he realized he'd said it out loud. Brother Feng. You mean I've gotten taller? Asked the naive Nicole. Feng jokingly said that's exactly what he meant, but Mina understood. Enough pleasantries and let's talk business, said Uncle Neo. Turning to his sons, he told them to swear allegiance and service to Feng. Feng was surprised and said he wanted Ben to be the steward. Ben said that Feng's kindness filled his heart. But he also recalled that he was without a leg. And because of that, he's almost useless. Smiling, Feng said that he had a way to help him walk like a normal person again, and at that moment everyone was surprised. Feng put something on his leg. The whole Neo family was amazed at what Feng had just done. Ben stood up and took up his spear. You could see by the look on his face that he was ready to make a move. And so Ben was able to stand on his feet without the spear, leaning on his prosthetic. And Feng probably bought it. Ben began to take his first steps. May was thrilled with what she saw. And Ben couldn't believe he could walk again. May started crying with happiness and her makeup got a little messed up. Everyone was happy and cried with joy because their loved one could walk freely on 2 legs again. Well, after a little practice he would be able to walk, as Feng said. May wiped her tears little by little with her hand. Ben and May looked at each other. Fong noticed something at that moment. The whole family started walking towards Fong and he didn't understand why. Young Master Lu Fong said all the brothers and Ben in unison. "We will be your sword to slay your enemies." Fong was surprised at these words. He smiled and realized it was a worthy beginning. "I am grateful to you for believing in me," said Fong, and made Ben the steward of this castle, in addition to asking him to teach him how to run the city. At that moment a letter from Baron Omar came to the grain store, stating that the plan to take the city of Shiyan was about to begin. Colorful birds sitting nicely in a tree. There was a shout from the grain stall. 3 copper coins for 500 grams of grain, asked the boy unhappily. After all, just yesterday there were only 2 coins. Yesterday was yesterday, smiling, said the merchant. And today is today, he continued. Taking advantage of his position, he raised the price. The man was furious at such insolence. The merchant replied that the prices were hung by order of Baron Omar. The bright sun glinted off the neighborhood. All the people were heading somewhere, saying that they had heard that the city lord's castle would start giving out free food. A disgruntled man threw down a sack of grain and said he wouldn't buy anything. The merchant was surprised at what the people were saying. Someone was beating a drum loudly with a stick. And he did it without stopping beating. "Come and look at our vacancies, we are hiring clerks, hunters and strong men with good wages," shouted Ben to the people, and everyone listened attentively to him. Then he started to tell about the wages. Clerks received 120 copper coins a month, hunters 120 copper coins a month, strong men 80 copper coins a month. The people could not believe that the wages could be so high and thought it was a trick. Because it was twice the previous lord's salary, so they are definitely trying to cheat them. "I am Lu Fong." And people immediately turned their head back. Someone was striding toward them with his shoes on. "Always keep my promises," said Fong in his new colorful clothes, and behind him stood Mina in her maid outfit. Bright lights illuminated the towers of the city. People couldn't believe their eyes that it was the same Lu Fong. Some even fell in love at first sight, because he was so handsome and they had never seen such clothes before. Mina looked even more gorgeous in her maid's clothes. Everyone was just talking about their clothes. Fong said he'd take care of it now. Ben nodded his head in response. Fong started talking about how everything that is written is true, but job applicants will have to take a test. And they wouldn't just get a paycheck. And at that moment, people smelled something delicious. Fong pointed his finger to the place where the 2 brothers are roasting a big pile of boars while May and Nicole are boiling soup in a big cauldron. Those who came closer were already drooling and couldn't wait to taste it. People were just in love with the food. The crowd stood and screamed in delight. But the swarthy guy still thought it was some kind of trap. Between the food tables and there was a table where Lu Fong sat. He sat and waited for whoever wanted to be first. An old man shouted out from the crowd. He said confidently that he wanted to be first. Ba Fu came closer and said he wanted to be a clerk and had already written something. He wrote a short essay about his dream. Fong was struck by Ba Fu's concern for other people. With a smile on his face, Fong said that the old man had passed and now he was a clerk. Nicole brought some beef noodles to the old man as well as some roast pork. Ba Fu's mouth immediately drooled. Old man Ba Fu took the tray away from Nicole. He decided to try the beef noodles first. It didn't take a second before he couldn't stop eating it. But then at one point his face got a little mangled. The other people thought he'd probably been poisoned. The brown guy had already pulled out a Tessac to deal with the criminals. And immediately he started running towards Fong. But the old man at this point started crying with his fork in his mouth and saying it's divinely delicious. From this turn of events, the swarthy guy tripped and fell. While the guy with the scar on his face was shouting at the old man, he was saying that he had never eaten anything tastier in his life. The other role people got excited and are also getting in line to try it. One of Neo's sons began to talk about the obstacles the people had to go through. Little by little everyone began to disperse who was going where. From a high tower, Feng Ming and Nicole watched the obstacle course. Feng said he didn't expect everyone to be excited. And also thanks Nicole for her cooking skills. Embarrassed, Nicole says it was Feng who taught her how to cook like that. As soon as Feng wanted to pet Mina, she immediately ducked. Mina told Feng not to keep his paws off her. Feng was already making excuses that he just wanted to thank her. He was upset that he couldn't pet her ears. Nicole was concerned about this friendship. Mina looked very dangerous and not very friendly to her. The people were already exhausted but willing to continue for this kind of food. All they were trying to complete an obstacle course. But little by little they fell and dropped out. Some dropped out because their clothes got caught. And some couldn't climb the rope up the mountain. Benny realized that this course was very difficult and even for his family, although they had been training since they were children. People would gather and discuss how difficult it was. Ben realized that if I kept going on like this they were unlikely to recruit even one. Feng was reading The Art of War at this point and he was upset that he didn't expect so few people to pass the test. Young master, said a female voice. It was Nicole and her breasts were also beautiful. She brought Feng some snacks. Their freshly baked red bean pie and coffee. This combination looked just lovely. The pie had a mild and sweet flavor and wasn't even cloying. Feng was in awe of Nicole's skill. And Nicole was pleased that the young master liked it. Something approached sweet very quickly. And then the sweet disappeared from the plate. Mina took it all in 1 second without leaving a bite for the others. Nicole wasn't very happy about that. Because she'd been making it all morning just for little brother Fan. My lord, something bad has happened, said the old man. Ben confirms that right now the townspeople are preparing to leave town and beg for alms. Feng spit out his coffee because of the news. He put the coffee cup on the table. And immediately started asking what's wrong. Ben explained that anyone who couldn't pass the test couldn't get their provisions and the grain merchants had raised their prices. And now everyone was starving. Ben asks that Feng relax the recruitment standards. Mina starts laughing a little. Because she'd seen the test and knew it was pretty simple. With a cup of coffee in her hand, she called all people weak. Ben got a little angry. Feng tapped his palm on the table. With confidence he said that standards would not be lowered. And that made Ben and Ba Fu a little embarrassed. But still Feng continued to speak. Feng decided to visit one of the merchants who had raised the price of grain and he was kindly greeted by him as if nothing had happened. So it was you who raised the price of food? Feng asked. Then he took a step forward. With his foot he stepped on the belly of the merchant, saying that this was monopoly speculation and he would not let it go. The trader didn't move an inch because it was the power of the fat layer. Immediately he started to justify himself and said that if people don't like the prices too high, they can just not buy the grain. Smiling, he said he didn't see a problem with that. Fan got a little angry. He immediately grabbed the hilt of Ben's sword and ran towards the merchant with the sword. Feng pointed the sword at the merchant's throat and said he dared not use the grain as a means of profit. Feng suspects that the merchant doesn't realize the position he is in. The merchant immediately smiled. Grabbing the tip of the ball he told Feng to calm down. At first Feng didn't understand why he was so calm. But the merchant explained that there was a law that allowed him to raise prices whenever he wanted. Feng asked Ba Fu if this was true and the old man confirmed. Pretending to be a victim, the merchant said that he was honestly conducting his small business in accordance with the law. He knew that with Omar's support he was not afraid of him. Feng was well aware that he would not be able to deal with the merchant today. He knew that the merchant was not going to lower the price after all. And lastly, Feng said that the merchant would regret it. The merchant said they would never regret it. Well, just as mockingly he said for Feng to be careful on the way to his castle. The villagers were actively discussing the increase in grain prices. They knew that merchants always raise prices at this time of year. Someone put up a new advertisement. People wondered what announcement old man Ba Fu had put on the board. The ad was for a company about remodeling houses and recruiting workers. People asked the old man if what was written on the advertisement was true. Ba Fu coughed a little. He explained that it was true and if anyone was interested, they could start working right away. People immediately started cheering and asking to be hired. It was a normal sunny day. Ba Fu was showing people the plan of the house. Some people were already working hard without saving energy. A couple of people were mixing concrete for the house. Others were hammering boards for the roof. After the workday, all the people were lining up for their food. They were very happy because they saw that there really is food there and it's wonderful. In the evening at the store of the merchant who raises the prices, there was a discussion about no one buying anything for a long time. And Fatty was eating something at the same time. Saying all was well, he was greedily tearing off a fried chicken leg. Others didn't think so since their food was given away for free while they raised the price. 3 days, said the fat one, pointing 3 fingers. Smiling, he said the city lord's grain supply wouldn't last more than 3 more days. One of them said that Feng would suddenly be able to handle it too. But the merchant wasn't worried and he told us that it wasn't a hindrance and they'd soon eat it up. The others started laughing and cheering the trader on. In the castle, Feng worked hard and Nicole brought him another cup of coffee. With a serious face, he was drawing some kind of map of the city. Young master, said Nicole, putting the cup on the table. What is it? Feng asked, looking away from the map. Nicole was very worried about what was happening now. Because she knew the supply would run out soon. In the sunlight, people were working hard building houses and also discussing how many kilograms of grain they had gotten. Construction work was in full swing. As the queue lined up to get their grain, one of the people noticed that they were getting less grain this time. The one who was giving out the grain went to the old man and said that it was all gone anyway. Ba Fu said he had already reported it to the Lord. Feng stood looking at the mountains thinking about what he should do next, and at that moment Nicole came up to him. She told him that there was no more grain in the storerooms. Smiling, Feng said it was all right. And at this point the people were already panicking and getting angry because they weren't getting grain. Just in time for the merchant to arrive. Smiling, he started talking about how the Lord had deceived them. And then he began to tease, asking why the grain had been stopped. Pointing at the people, he said they were all waiting and hungry. Ba Fu didn't know what to do now. On purpose to the public, the merchant asked how much grain they had left. And at this point the people began to get even angrier as their children were waiting for them at home. Ba Fu began to calm everyone down by telling them to calm down and wait a little so that they could distribute the food to them. Making himself the savior, the merchant asked if they needed his help. The merchant's henchmen began to press Ba Fu too, saying that their lord had deceived them and they could save everyone. Little by little the people began to lose faith in the Lord. The Topa again began to shout for their grain to be given to them. They thought that if they did not get it now they would starve to death. the bravest one shouted that the present lord was no different from the one before him. Ba-Fu realized that the situation was escalating by the second. He pointed a stick at one of the men, saying that it was not worth rioting. But instead they thought he was a traitor too and mobbed the poor old man. They dragged him around like a doormat. Poor Ba-Fu held on with all his might. And the man who distributed the grain wanted to make peace with them. Quite someone shouted in an angry voice. "What the hell are you doing here?" Feng asked menacingly. People were a little surprised that the city lord had already shown up. But the merchant, on the other hand, was not happy about it. As he got closer and closer to Ba-Fu, Feng asked what exactly was going on here. Feng said that the culprits might not come to work. And at that moment everyone abruptly lowered their heads. Old man Ba-Fu coughed a little after being beaten. The merchant wouldn't stop pushing, saying that they should finally distribute the grain to everyone. Feng at this point realized what the matter was. Feng proudly said that the grain would definitely be distributed, so he asks them to wait a bit. Taking out his handkerchief from his pocket, the merchant began to pretend to cry and that he felt sorry for the people. He was feeling sorry for the children at home. Pretending to be a savior, he said they were free to buy grain from him. And people slowly began to believe it. After these words, Feng realized what the merchant's plan was. Feng started walking towards the merchant. He bluntly said that I was laser expensive, but the merchant started to insinuate that Lord is greedy. Smirking, he said that his grain was only worth 20 copper coins per kilogram. Without crying, he began to insinuate that money was more important to Feng than people. Believing the merchant's tears, the people began to riot and shout for the Lord to buy the grain from him and give it to them. Mina watched Feng's actions carefully. And now it was almost dark and the merchant had no intention of loosening his grip. The embittered men stood and surrounded the Lord and the merchant. Each of them glared angrily at Feng Nu while the merchant smiled and tossed sticks into the fire. Well, towards the end he decided to say that Feng didn't care how much they worked. And that made the people even angrier. And they started yelling for him to give them the grain right away. And then they ran to the Lord's castle for supplies. Feng didn't know what to do now. And the merchant's grin grew angrier and angrier. He and his henchmen laughed so hard it could be heard throughout the city. But one of the men noticed something and pointed his finger at everyone. There were some sacks over that way. The face of the traitor changed dramatically. And Feng and Mina looked carefully in that direction. It was Ben and his sons on horseback and carrying some sacks. "Young master, your grain has arrived," shouted Ben. Feng was very happy that they had made it in time. The merchant was completely shocked and couldn't even say a word. Ben knelt down in front of Feng and said that they had safely completed the task. Feng smilingly asked for Ben to get off his knee. Ben said that thanks to the Lord's logic they were able to leave and buy grain. As much grain as he had ordered was bought. Feng asked that Ba-Fu pass on his order. To begin distributing the grain, joyfully shouted Feng, raising his hand in the air. The people were very pleased and laughed joyfully. "Long life to the city lord forever," the people shouted and tossed Feng up above them while the merchant stood silently watching. "What are we going to do now?" asked one of the henchmen. While the bird sang on the branch, Feng slept carefree in his bed. At that moment he was having some good dreams. Someone took hold of the handle with his hand. And the door to Feng's room opened. Someone's shadow hung over the sleeping lord of the city. "He's so handsome," well thought Nicole, peeking at Feng sleeping. In Nicole's little fantasy, Feng looked even more handsome. Nicole looked to her left first. Then she also looked to the right. Closing her eyes, she thought about not getting caught. Now she wanted to kiss Feng. "What are you doing?" Mina asked when Nicole was about to kiss him. "Nothing at all," Nicole shouted and jumped back. "Why are you walking without making a sound?" she asked Mina. Mina said it was because she was a warrior. And at that moment, Fong just woke up. He stood up a little and started wiping his eyes while Nicole and Mina stood beside him. Nicole said in a rush that she brought Fong his delicious breakfast. And then reiterated that that was why she had come. "You've had a rough day," smilingly said Fan, eating one of Mina's buns, and said that the training camp was over. Fong was only happy for the good news from the morning. "Mina, you are really my mascot." "Very happy," said Fong, introducing her as a mascot. But Mina didn't care and asked him to hurry up. Nicole doesn't understand why Fong puts up with Mina. After getting ready, Fong told Nicole that he would like to eat the cooked pork stew. "Gladly cooked," said Nicole, smiling very happily. Under the bright shining sun, all the people gathered at the training field as agreed earlier, and Fong stood on top of the castle. People were still thinking about the free food. Ben said that these people were strictly selected to agree with Fang's demands. Fong began his address to the future soldiers. He began to say that the reason they did not pass the test it was because they were not getting enough food. Fong said that he was here to offer them free grain. But that was on the condition that they practiced hard. And if they pass the exam now, they will only be given food. Their whole family will be completely exempt from taxes. People were stunned and didn't know how to react. But then in 1 second they all started shouting and rejoicing at what they were about to hear. Fong said joyfully that it was time to begin. Ben blew his whistle. Well lined up and pointed with his hand at his sons. Ben said that today they would be responsible for their full training. And now they were divided into groups. Some he sent to his son with afro hair. Others to the son with long bangs. And finally he categorized all the people into 5 groups. Under the hot sun, the training began. The first one to jump over a stick that was on fire. But he failed and set his ass on fire. The second one was trying very hard to climb up the rope. Well, as it turned out, he didn't move an inch. Someone was happily climbing the wall using others. Fong New sympathized with Ben, saying he had a rather difficult task ahead of him. Ben immediately started shouting for them to train harder, because whoever didn't finish training would lose their lunch. Mina was a little amused. She remembered the time when she was practicing with Henri and the others. And she wondered how they were doing now. Somewhere deep in the forest where there was an entrance to an unfamiliar cave. There was a small fire burning. A boy named Fuji was shouting that their little sister still hadn't returned. "And what do you want me to do?" said the girl. "She has to take care of herself," Henri continued to say. Fuji forgave for Henri to do something. But Henri reminded him that their priority was to head south. Otherwise they would all starve to death since they hadn't eaten in a long time. They all sat around the fire, but there was nothing to eat. Some even had small children. But Fuji stood by his word. He said he wouldn't go south without his older sister. And the others slowly began to support him in this. Henri didn't know what to say. Fuji offered to kill all the people and save the second older sister. "Stop!" shouted loudly to Henri. Vividly, everyone immediately returned here. Then she deftly jumped in their direction. And holding her head, Fuji did a somersault. She landed softly at the entrance to the cave. But then she tripped and fell. Everyone was shocked because they knew she couldn't do it, but she did it. She shook it off and got up quickly. And immediately started yelling that they had no brains because they didn't even know where she was. Fuji asked what they should do in that case then. Henri said that they would now go to the nearest town to look for any traces. Fixing his hat, Fuji thought about how kind Henri was. He'd gotten into town, but he didn't know what was going on. After a few seconds, he smelled something. He saw a large cauldron in which broth was boiling. "It smells good," Fuji shouted, and his stomach rumbled. "If you are hungry, come and eat," said the pretty girl with pink hair. Fuji realized that there was a lot of food here. He immediately thought of his brothers and sisters and also of the little children who were starving. He asked to be signed up for a job. He did everything as fast as anyone else from the laborers. Whatever he was asked to do he could do, and because of this everyone was shocked. Without much difficulty he carried several bags of cement. And then came the sunset. People lined up to get food and grain for their day's work. Fuji held his first sack he had earned. His whole body was shaking, but he was very happy to have food.